Hi, this is Chuck, and I'm going to be doing a little narration on the 1971 trip to Finland with Mom and Dad, Cliff, and Mary Lee and I. We started the trip on the 24th of August that year. Mom and Dad had been in Germany about a week before that, and they had driven down to Luxembourg to pick up Cliff, who had flown in there just 2 or 3 days before we took off on this trip on the 24th of August. And we rented a VW passenger van, and we're going to use that to drive up to the north coast of Germany and then take a ferry from there to Helsinki and then drive from Helsinki all the way around Rovaniemi, and it's over 1,000-mile trip to get there to Rovaniemi, and then our plan was to wind up and visit relatives in Imatra, which is first stop, head up to Rovaniemi, and then come back and visit more relatives in Turku, which is on the west coast of Finland, and from there take a ferry over to Sweden, and then drive from Sweden back home through Copenhagen. The first night we spent was in a nice hotel in the Harz Mountains, and this is pictures of us driving through that little town. I don't remember the name of it, but it was a comfortable drive in this VW. Along the way we saw the typical German, and which would be also the Finnish countryside, which is sort of flat and with little farms along the way. After we checked into this very modern hotel that we stayed at overnight, we decided to do a little sightseeing and headed further up the coast to a little resort town called Timmendorfer Strand. Right on the ocean. The water was really quite rough, and I sort of worried about what would happen the next day. Luckily it did calm down. But we enjoyed just sort of walking along the beach and then out on a pier into the ocean, and as the sun went down. Along with these movies, and there'll be quite a number of feet devoted to this visit to this little coastal town. I really found it quite picturesque and enjoyed getting used to my new movie camera and getting pictures of the family. Mary Lee and I had been, this is in August of 1971. We had been in Germany since December of 1970, and I was in the Army, a second lieutenant, assigned to a transportation company, and this was the first extended leave that I took that time. The folks were able to come over about a week before we left on this trip, so they got acclimated to the time and everything, and they drove to Luxembourg to pick up Cliff, who had flown in there. And Cliff arrived a couple days before we left on this long tour. The five of us had worked out very well in our little one-bedroom apartment. I don't remember what the sleeping accommodations were, but I'm sure that the folks got the bed in the bedroom, and that Cliff and Mary Lee and I shared couch and probably some sleeping bags out in the living room. But it worked out fine. It gave us a chance to get our feet on the ground and get ready for this trip, which would be a trip of a lifetime for us as a family. We had rented a VW minibus with 3 seats, and we were quite comfortable in it, and it served us well during this trip. You'll excuse me with all of these artsy shots, but it really was a beautiful evening, and some of these pictures are the best in the entire roll of film. They still hold up after 53 years later. After this walk along the beach and gathering starfish, it was time to head back to the hotel. We got a good night's sleep, and the next day we were off to Finland, driving our brown VW bus into the hold of the ferry, and then going off to discover the things that the ferry held. 3 floors. We went tourist class, which meant that the rooms had bunk beds, but it was quite comfortable. Despite that, here we are, Mom and Dad, looking as we push off on our trip to Helsinki. It would be a 2-day and 1-night trip to Helsinki, and this is the boat we were on. Did a lot of sitting on the deck, which was really quite nice. It was a sunny trip, and we went up to the upper deck, Cliff and Mary Lee and I, and took our folding chairs and tried to get them set so we could sit down. It was quite breezy, as you can see, but it was really sort of enjoyable. We felt like we were on a real ocean cruise, and just sat up there and read our books. This is before any sort of sound system we could plug in our ears, but just enjoyed the scenery and the whole ambiance of being aboard a ship crossing the ocean. We had lots of seagulls that would follow us all the way across, and Mary Lee gets inspired later on in this movie with the seagulls. You see her interpretation of a gull on the wing. I wonder if the inspiration for the Titanic scenes up on the bow of the Titanic came from these scenes of Cliff and Mary Lee looking into the wind. My shoes. My view. Again, these are early days when I was experimenting with all kinds of visual shots. Sun behind somebody's head. How did that work? Well, here's Mary Lee's famous bird dance. First of all, she decided she was going to climb up, saw the birds, was inspired to climb up the smokestack. Sun was going down. End of a beautiful day at sea. No storm in sight. We had fairly smooth sailing. So inspired by the gulls and the sunset, Mary Lee did her little dance, which luckily I had the movie camera out to capture. We didn't arrive in Helsinki until almost midnight this night, and we unloaded our minivan and went straight to the motel we had reserved. And from there, our Finnish adventure would start. We drove to Imatra, which is the home of Dad's second cousin, Mia, who had come to visit Sally in Florida the year before. She lives in a little 2-room house surrounded by her large flourishing garden. We went that night to another relative's and had just an amazing dinner. Sat around the kitchen afterwards and Mom and Dad spoke Finn, well, they thought they were. And after 5 minutes of conversation, they turned to Mary Lee and I and give us a synopsis of what had been talked about. And I realized Finn is like Martian. You just can't understand a word of it. So it was an interesting experience. The next day, we all got into the minivans and drove to a famous dam, which provides most of the power for southern Finland. It creates a large lake, and there's a celebration every year when they release waters from the dam in preparation for the wintertime. And lots of people come down to watch this water run. We were too early for that, but we did see where the waters flow. There's just a ton of relatives here wanting to meet their American distant relatives. And it was fun, although we certainly weren't able to carry on much of a conversation. Just the language barrier was just too strong. I mentioned meals before. One of the great things we discovered was a Finnish, almost like a pie. It's rye dough that's been baked to a thin crust and then folded over a filling of rice and whatever else, and called piraka. Very, very tasty. Imatra, the town we were in, is one of the easternmost parts of Finland, and it borders Russia. So we went there to one of the places where there's actually a road that goes into Russia. And of course, we didn't try to cross, but it was an interesting thing to look across that border and see Russia on the other side. We then headed back to the home we were staying at and had another giant meal. They certainly feed us well here in Finland. And the next day it was time to hit the road and do our own exploration as we headed up to Rovaniemi, which is right on the Arctic Circle. The countryside is mostly flat, but there are lots and lots of lakes, which is the way Finland is. And we rented a cabin the night before we got to Rovaniemi, and it was really out in the woods and very, very pretty on a lake. Also saw the largest wooden church in Europe on this trip. And then we arrived for a second night cabin in a farmer's cabin that he rented us, and that included the next morning a sauna that we all wanted to take and fulfill the ambition of taking a hot sauna and then running into a cold lake to see how that worked. Dad was the first one in and out of the sauna, and we had films of him going down, and I remember thinking, my goodness, what will we do if he has a heart attack? Well, luckily he didn't. And because of Dad's success, Cliff was next. He was heating up in the sauna for about 15-20 minutes, and when Dad was out of the lake, it was Cliff's turn to come bursting out of that sauna and run down that hill and get into the really kind of cold waters. We're very far up north, almost to the Arctic Circle, so even though it's pretty and the days look warm, they're not. And the water was, even though it had been this end of the summer, had never heated up to a comfortable level. So it was quite a shock to first get into that water. But it was surprising. Your body's been conditioned by the super heat of the sauna, and when you get into the water, you don't really feel it for a while. And then all of a sudden you start realizing, hey, my legs are cold. Mary Lee and I did the same. Mom took the movies, and I'm glad you did, just to prove that we, in fact, did the sauna and run into a cold lake routine. Finland's a lot like northern Wisconsin, probably even more so Minnesota, and I can see why the Finnish people coming from Finland to find a new life in America would tend to settle in northern Wisconsin or or Minnesota. There was also work they could do, such as mining and farming. Unfortunately, my active film taking sort of ended with this. We got up to Rovaniemi and then headed back south towards Turku, where more of Dad's relatives lived. We saw them. We had an unbelievable stay at a motel. We just kind of stumbled on late one night on the way to the ferry we would take to Sweden. This is what the hotel looked like from the outside. It was an amazing experience, including a striptease artist that came out in the middle of dinner and did her little act. In Copenhagen, we spent a couple of days and one night, and the night was spent at Tivoli Gardens. And it's a famous amusement park that is not so dependent, at least back in 1971, not so dependent on thrill rides as it is with human performances. Band arrives to open up the gates, and everyone follows them into the park when it opens in the evening. And there are all kinds of live acts, musical acts, and tumbling acts, and we'll see some of them here. Little plays, little farce plays that go on in the gardens. And we stayed the entire night, staying until midnight when they have the giant fireworks display that closes the park for the evening. It was unforgettable. The 10 days on the road to this driving trip to Finland, we covered over 2,000 miles, and like I say, 10 days on the road. We had some very nice places we stayed, and we certainly ate very well. It was really a great family experience. All of us, each of us, got something out of it that we had wanted to do, and most of all, it just was a good time together as a family. After Tivoli Gardens, we got back in the VW bus and got over to Germany and drove home. And from there, Mom and Dad took a 3-day trip in my Mustang down to the Black Forest. And Cliff was trying to rent a car, didn't have any luck with that, and finally got on a train to go to Paris. And with that, our family vacation was done, but it was quite a interesting trip to Finland in the autumn of 1971. Mary Lee and I would have other family members come and visit us before we left Germany in the summer of 1972. Mary Lee's sister Judy and brother Mike came over in March, and Mike went skiing, and Judy went with us on a driving trip to Spain and back, and that was a 2,500-mile journey that we did in a VW bus. This one we didn't rent. I bought one from my motor sergeant for I think $100, and amazingly, it got us down to Spain, around the entire coast of Spain, through Portugal, and coming back home. The only problem was it didn't have any heat. The motor sergeant had been very clever and taken the VW bus body and put a VW Bug engine in the back, so it was terribly underpowered. There was no heater hookup, and so there were times we were driving through the mountains of Spain, hitting, barely chugging along to get over a hill, and I had to wear my socks on my hands because I hadn't brought any gloves. It was March, and it was not quite summertime yet. That was also a really incredible experience. Our time in Germany was really some of the best times of our lives. We made really good friends over there, other couples who were just newly married and new to the Army. We helped each other get through the experience, and with visits like this from family, it just sort of rounded everything out. I had a wonderful experience in the Army, and I'm glad I was able to share it with Mary Lee and family.